Her fingers smelled like calendula paste and sheep lanolin when she pressed them into the gash along the black wolf's rib cage. And the wolf, who was Kyle Ashenmore, Alpha King of the Northern Dominion, bit down on his own tongue so hard he tasted copper. He had planned to stay one night. He had been wrong. But we should start from the beginning, from the moment Elara Voss found him bleeding in her goat pen, because that was the moment the most powerful shifter on the continent decided to become a house pet. Elara worked nights at the Greymoss Pack Veterinary Clinic, not as a veterinarian, but as the overnight animal attendant, the one who mopped the surgical floors and changed soiled bedding and held trembling dogs while the actual doctor stitched them up. She was 23. She was an Omega without a pack mark, which in the border territories meant she was no one. Her former pack, the Ashwild, had not expelled her with ceremony or cruelty. They had simply stopped including her. Her name vanished from the meal rotation. Her cot in the communal hall was reassigned to a storage shelf. One morning, she woke to find her toothbrush moved to a box by the back door. And she understood. That was 2 years ago. Now she lived in a converted lambing shed at the edge of Greymoss territory, a structure the pack elder let her use because no one else wanted it. The roof leaked in 3 places. She had positioned tin buckets under each leak so precisely that when it rained, the dripping made a rhythm she had come to find comforting, almost musical. It was raining the night the wolf appeared. She heard the goats first, their panicked bleating cutting through the percussion of water on tin. She grabbed the lantern and the wooden crook she kept by the door, expecting a fox or perhaps a stray dog. Instead, she found a wolf the size of a small horse collapsed against the fence post, his black fur matted with blood and mud, his amber eyes half shut, his breathing a shallow rasp that made his whole body shudder. Elara froze. She knew wolves. She knew that a shifted alpha in this state could kill her with a reflex, a twitch of jaw, and she would be dead before her brain registered the movement. But the wolf opened one eye and looked at her, and the sound he made was not a growl. It was a whimper, small, almost immorist. What she did not know, what the wolf needed her not to know, was that Kyle Ashenmore had arrived at this goat pen deliberately. He had been ambushed 3 miles east of the Greymoss border by a faction of his own council, 4 shifted wolves who wanted his throne and nearly took his throat. He had killed 2. The others fled. But the wounds were deep, and his ability to shift back to human form was temporarily gone, his body pouring every ounce of healing energy into keeping his organs intact. He needed shelter. He needed to not be found. He had not planned on the Omega girl with the calendula paste. She approached him the way she approached the clinic animals, low and slow, her voice a steady murmur. She set the lantern down so it would not blind him. She extended the back of her hand, not the palm, because palms look like grabbing and backs look like offering. She had learned this from 2 years of frightened animals, and she did not realize she was applying it to a king. "Come on then," she said. "Let me see." Kyle could have refused. He could have dragged himself into the tree line and healed alone in the cold. His wolf, the instinct that lived beneath his rational mind, considered this for approximately 1/2 of 1 second before leaning its massive head into her hand. Her fingers were warm. They smelled like calendula paste and sheep lanolin, and underneath that, something else. Lavender, not perfume. Skin. Her actual skin smelled like lavender and rain-soaked wool, and his wolf pressed its nose into her wrist and inhaled so deeply that she laughed. "Ticklish," she said. "Sorry. Come on, big boy. Let us get you inside." She could not lift him, but she draped his foreleg over her shoulder and half walked, half dragged a 240-pound wolf across 15 feet of muddy ground and through the narrow door of her lambing shed. She deposited him on the braided rug beside her wood stove. She did not flinch at the blood he left on her shirt, on her floor, on her only good blanket. She simply filled a basin with warm water, tore a bedsheet into strips, and began to clean his wounds. That was when she started humming. It was not a song with words. It was a lullaby, something tuneless and circular, the kind of melody that a person hums when they are alone and have forgotten anyone might hear. She hummed it while she dabbed at the gash along his ribs. She hummed it while she picked gravel from the torn pad of his left rear paw. She hummed it while she smeared the calendula paste into each wound with fingers so gentle that Kael, Alpha King, conqueror of the Black Ridge Campaign, feared slayer of the southern feral packs, closed his amber eyes and felt something in his chest crack open like an egg. His wolf rumbled a low, continuous purr. "This is not purring," he told himself. "Wolves do not purr. This is a respiratory irregularity caused by blood loss." His wolf purred louder. By morning, his wounds had closed enough that he could have shifted. He could have stood up as a man, thanked her, and walked away. Instead, when Alara woke from where she had fallen asleep, sitting against the wall with her hand on his flank, she found the wolf still lying on her rug, watching her with unblinking amber eyes, and she smiled the way people smile at stray cats that have decided to stay. "You are still here," she said. She scratched behind his ear. His back leg twitched involuntarily, and deep inside his own skull, Kyle Ashenmore experienced a level of humiliation that no battlefield had ever inflicted. "I will leave today," he told himself. Absolutely. Without question. As soon as she stopped scratching that exact spot. She did not stop. By noon she had named him Shadow. By evening she had fed him leftover lamb stew from a ceramic bowl she placed on the floor, and he had eaten it with the dignity of a creature who had, 48 hours earlier, dined on roasted venison served on silver platters. By the second morning, Kael acknowledged a problem. His wounds had healed. Fully. The gash along his ribs was now a pink seam beneath new fur. The torn paw pad was smooth. His ability to shift had returned hours ago. He was, by any medical or magical standard, completely fine. He stayed. He stayed because she hummed the lullaby again while she changed his unnecessary bandages. He stayed because she told him about her day while she brushed the mud from his coat, speaking to him the way people speak to animals, which is to say, honestly. "I lost 3 lambs this week at the clinic," she said, working a tangle from behind his ear. "Dr. Harlow says I care too much, that I should not name them." She paused. "I always name them." He stayed because when she left for her night shift, she kissed the top of his massive black head and said, "Guard the house, Shadow. I will be back." No one had ever asked anything of him that gently. So Kael Ashenmore, Alpha King, owner of a castle with 47 rooms and a personal guard of 300 wolves, began commuting. By day, he excused himself from her shed while she was at the clinic, shifted behind the tree line, pulled on the clothes his bewildered beta had stashed in a hollowed oak per frantic midnight telepathic instruction, and returned to his duties at the Dominion stronghold 7 miles north. He held court. He reviewed border treaties. He signed execution orders with the same hand that, 6 hours later, would be a paw resting on an Omega's lap while she read aloud from a water-damaged romance novel she had found in the clinic, lost and found. His beta, Dorian, was the first to notice. "You smell like sheep," Dorian said during a council briefing. Kael did not look up from the treaty. I was inspecting the eastern farmlands. The eastern farmlands are cattle ranches, my king. Then I was inspecting those also. Dorian stared at him for a long moment. And the lavender. Kael turned a page. New soap. It was not new soap. It was Alara's hands on his fur, her scent transferring like a confession he could not scrub away. And every wolf in the council chamber could smell it. And not one of them dared say a word, because the last wolf who had questioned the Alpha King's personal habits had been reassigned to latrine inspection on the northern border. The nights followed a pattern. Kael would leave the stronghold after sunset, shift in the forest, and appear at Alara's door with an increasingly transparent series of excuses for his return. The first night, he scratched at the door and limped. She gasped and pulled him inside and checked his ribs. "Oh no," she said. "Did it reopen?" She probed the fully healed seam with concerned fingers. "It does not look bad. Maybe just rest tonight. Stay with me." He was not proud of the limp. He told himself that. The second night, he brought a rabbit. He had caught it on the way and carried it in his jaws and dropped it at her feet, and she had stared at it, then at him. And then she had laughed with her whole body, a laugh that started in her belly and came out in gasps. "Are you courting me?" she said. "You strange, enormous thing." She took the rabbit. She made stew. The third night, she was already waiting at the door. She had left it open. "I knew you would come back," she said. She said it simply, without weight, the way she might observe that it was raining. And it cracked something in him again, that effortless certainty, as though of course he would come back, as though this was where he belonged. By the fourth night, the pattern expanded. Alara took a bath. The lambing shed had no proper bathroom, only a large tin tub behind a hanging sheet, and she filled it with heated water and climbed in, and Shadow, as she still called him, was lying on the rug 3 feet away. "No peeking," she told the wolf. She was speaking to the Alpha King. She did not know this. Kael stared fixedly at the far wall. He studied the grain pattern of the wooden planks with an intensity he had never applied to any military strategy. His wolf, however, had no such scruples, and the internal negotiation between man and beast reached a pitch that bordered on psychotic. "We are not looking," Kael said internally. "She smells like warm lavender water," his wolf replied. "And she is singing." She was. The lullaby again. It echoed off the tin tub, gaining a resonance that the small room shaped into something almost holy, and Kael pressed his muzzle into his own paws and wondered when, exactly, his life had gone so catastrophically sideways. After the bath, she toweled off behind the sheet and emerged in an oversized wool sweater that hung to her knees, and she sat on the rug beside him and leaned against his side. And his fur was warm, and her hair was damp, and she said, "You know, Shadow, you are the only one who has stayed." The tub incident escalated. By the 5th night, Alara decided that Shadow himself needed a bath. He had been rolling in something outside, she claimed, and he smelled like a bog. This was not true. He smelled like a forest because he had been running through one. But she filled the tub with warm water and looked at him expectantly. "In," she said. She pointed at the tub. Kael considered his options. He was an Alpha King. He had killed a man with his bare hands at the age of 16. He had conquered 3 territories before his 25th birthday. He weighed 240 pounds in wolf form, and his bite force could snap a femur. He climbed into the tub. She lathered him with the same soap she used on the clinic dogs, a medicinal-smelling compound that stripped every trace of his natural scent and replaced it with something aggressively floral. She scrubbed behind his ears, She scrubbed his belly. She lifted each paw individually and cleaned between the pads, and when she reached his haunches, she said, "Turn around, let me get your back end." And the Alpha King of the Northern Dominion rotated obediently in a tin bathtub, while an Omega scrubbed his hindquarters with a dish brush. Dorian could never know about this. No one could ever know about this. He would dissolve the entire intelligence division before he would allow this information to exist. She dried him with a towel that had small embroidered daisies along its edges. It was, he suspected, her only good towel. She used it on him anyway, rubbing his fur until it fluffed, and when she was done, she cupped his enormous face in both hands and said, "Handsome boy." His tail wagged. He could not stop it. He could not even pretend it was a respiratory irregularity. The sleeping arrangements evolved with their own inevitability. The first night, he had slept on the rug. The second night, the rug beside the bed. By the sixth night, he was on the bed, which was technically a narrow cot never designed for a woman and a wolf the size of a sofa, and Alara curled against his side with her arm draped over his neck and her face buried in the thick fur at his throat. And she slept more deeply than she had in 2 years. And he did not sleep at all because every nerve ending in his body was on fire. His wolf was blissful. His wolf had never been happier. His wolf wanted to stay in this cot, in this leaking shed for the rest of eternity, and never move again. His human side was constructing increasingly elaborate justifications. "This is reconnaissance," he told Dorian the next morning at dawn, standing at the stronghold gates, smelling powerfully of floral dog soap. "I am surveilling Greymoss border security. Their perimeter is laughably porous. Any wolf could wander into a civilian dwelling completely undetected." Dorian looked at him. "For 6 days. Thorough surveillance requires time. You have lavender in your fur, behind your left ear." Kael reached up and found a small, dried sprig of lavender tucked behind his ear, and remembered Alara placing it there while he pretended to sleep, and he closed his fist around it so fast that his knuckles cracked. "Dispose of this," he said, handing it to Dorian. He took it back from Dorian 9 minutes later. The near exposure happened on the 7th day. Alara was walking shadow through the meadow behind her shed because she had decided that a wolf the size of a small horse needed exercise, and she had fashioned a leash from braided rope, and the Alpha King of the Northern Dominion was being walked on a rope leash through a field of wildflowers by a girl who weighed 120 pounds. 2 of his own border scouts emerged from the tree line on patrol. They were young wolves, shifted, and when they saw the massive black wolf walking beside a tiny Omega on a rope, they froze. One of them started to lower into a submissive bow, because every wolf in the Northern Dominion recognized their alpha's wolf form on instinct. Kael locked eyes with the scout and sent a single telepathic command so forceful it probably gave the young wolf a migraine. "You see nothing. You know nothing. Run." They ran. "Who were those wolves?" Alara said, watching them crash through the underbrush. "They seemed scared." Kael huffed. Alara patted his head. "It is okay, Shadow. You scared them off. Big brave boy." The Alpha King accepted this designation in silence, but the days in his human form presented their own complication. Because Kael, in order to maintain his surveillance excuse, had arranged an official diplomatic visit to Greymoss Pack territory. This meant that the Alpha King appeared in person at the Greymoss Pack Hall in full regalia, surrounded by his personal guard, and was introduced to every member of the pack, including the peripheral workers. Including Alara. She was brought forward last, after the ranked members and their families, almost an afterthought. The Greymoss Alpha, a thick-necked man named Torben, introduced her with barely concealed indifference. "This is Alara. She cleans the clinic." Kael looked at her. She looked at him. She was wearing the same oversized sweater she wore every night, and her hands were chapped from cleaning solution, and she met his eyes for exactly 1 second before dropping them to the floor. Because that was what an unranked Omega did before an Alpha King. She did not recognize him. Why would she? He was a man in black leather and silver, with a jaw like a hatchet and eyes the color of a winter storm, and the wolf she loved was a soft-eared creature who let her scrub his belly and tuck lavender behind his ear. But he recognized her. He recognized the calluses on her right hand from ringing mop heads. He recognized the faint scar on her wrist where a panicked cat had scratched her at the clinic. He recognized the way she stood, slightly turned inward, making herself smaller, taking up less space, the posture of a person who had learned that occupying space was a privilege she had not been granted. Something in his chest that had been cracking all week finally broke. "Your Majesty," Torben said. "Shall we proceed to the banquet hall?" Kael was still looking at Elara. She was already turning away, retreating to the edge of the room, assuming she was dismissed because she was always dismissed. "What is your role at the clinic?" he said. She turned back, startled. He was speaking to her. The Alpha King was speaking to her, and the entire hall had gone quiet. "I am the overnight attendant, Your Majesty. I clean and tend the animals. You tend wounded animals." "Yes, Your Majesty." He held her gaze 1 beat too long. She blinked. Something flickered behind her eyes, a brief confusion, as if a scent or a shadow had brushed past a memory she could not quite reach. Then it was gone, and she dropped her gaze again, and Kael made himself look away. But Torben had noticed the exchange, and Torben was not a stupid man. The problem with Torben, and Kael admitted this only in retrospect, was that Torben was not cruel. He was calculating. He saw the Alpha King's gaze linger on an unranked Omega in his pack, and he did not think love story. He thought political leverage. Within 2 days, Torben had reassigned Elara from the night shift to a visible daytime role at the clinic, dressed her in better clothes, and begun parading her through areas where the visiting Alpha King's entourage might see her. Torben also had a nephew. His name was Linden, and he was handsome in an obvious, uncomplicated way, with the kind of easy grin that made people trust him and the kind of ambition that should have made them stop. Linden appeared at Elara's shed on a Tuesday afternoon with a basket of fresh bread and a jar of honey. "Uncle Torben thought you could use some provisions," Linden said, leaning against her door frame with practiced ease. He glanced inside. "Cozy place. You live alone out here." "Just me and Shadow," Elara said. Shadow was under the bed. Shadow was the Alpha King. And the Alpha King was under the bed, watching Linden's boots through a gap in the hanging blanket, and every hair on his body was standing straight up. "Shadow," Linden repeated. "A pet. A wolf. He is shy." Shadow was not shy. Shadow was calculating the precise angle required to lunge from beneath the bed and close his jaws around Linden's ankle. Linden stayed for an hour. He was charming. He asked about her work. He complimented the braided rug. He touched her elbow when he laughed, a light, casual contact that meant nothing to Elara, and everything to the wolf beneath the bed, who could hear the blood moving through Linden's veins and was actively fantasizing about redistributing it across the floor. When Linden left, Elara crouched beside the bed. "You can come out now, you big baby," she said. "He was not going to hurt you." Kael crawled out from under the bed with as much dignity as a 240-pound wolf wedged beneath a cot frame could muster, which was none. He pressed his body against her legs and huffed into her knee. "Are you jealous?" She laughed. She rubbed his ears. "He is just a neighbor being nice." Kael's wolf growled. It was a low, sustained sound, like an engine idling, and it continued for the rest of the evening. That night, in the stronghold, Kael summoned Dorian, the Greymoss Alpha's nephew. Lyndon. What do we know about him? Dorian checked his records. 26, unmated. Minor disciplinary infractions, mostly brawling. He looked up. Why? Reassign him. To where? The Northern Latrine Division. Dorian stared. My king, we cannot reassign a wolf from another pack. That is a sovereignty violation and a potential act of war. Kael considered this. He considered geopolitics, treaty obligations, centuries of established pack law, the delicate balance of interterritorial relations. Then find something he has done wrong. He has not done anything wrong. He touched her arm. Dorian blinked. He touched. Whose arm? Kael said nothing. The silence stretched. Dorian, who had served this king for 11 years, who had seen him face down a feral horde without flinching, watched the most powerful alpha on the continent clench his jaw over an arm touch. Dorian chose his next words with the care of a man diffusing an explosive. Perhaps, he said slowly, a diplomatic approach. A dinner. At the stronghold, including the Greymoss border workers, we could assess the situation. Soma. Kael looked at him. She would be invited, Dorian clarified. Here, in proximity to you in your human form, away from the nephew. Kael unclenched his jaw by exactly 1 degree. Arrange it. The dinner was arranged. It was transparently pretextual, a cultural exchange event that no one had requested and no one believed in. But the Alpha King had ordered it, and so 30 Greymoss pack members found themselves seated at long tables in the Ashenmoor Stronghold dining hall, drinking wine they could not afford, and eating food most of them had never tasted. Elara was seated at the far end, near the servants' entrance, as far from the Alpha King's chair as the room's geometry allowed. Torben had arranged this. Kael noticed. Kael rearranged the seating chart 12 minutes before the event and placed Elara 4 seats to his left. Torben noticed. Neither man acknowledged the other's maneuvering. But it was Lyndon who created the crisis because Lyndon took the empty seat beside Elara and began talking to her with the comfortable intimacy of a man who had already decided she was available. You look different tonight, Lyndon told her. He said it warmly, like a compliment. The new dress suited her. Torben had provided it, a simple blue thing that nonetheless made her look less like a night shift janitor and more like a person someone might notice. I feel ridiculous, Elara whispered. She was fidgeting with her napkin, folding it into smaller and smaller triangles. I do not belong at a table like this. You belong wherever you decide to sit, Lyndon said, and he covered her hand with his. 4 seats away, the Alpha King snapped the stem of his wine glass. The sound cut through the table conversation like a gunshot. Red wine pooled across the white linen. Every wolf at the table felt the pulse of alpha dominance that radiated from Kael's position, a pressure in the air like a thunderstorm building, and several Greymoss wolves dropped their gazes instinctively. Kael looked down at his hand, at the broken glass, at the wine spreading like blood. Forgive me, he said. His voice was perfectly controlled. The glass was flawed. Dorian, seated to his right, leaned in. My king, you are bleeding. Kael was. A shard had cut his palm. He was bleeding onto the white linen, and he had not noticed because he had been watching Lyndon's hand on Elara's hand, and the wolf inside him had been howling. He stood. He excused himself. He made it to the corridor before he put his fist through a stone wall, and the sound echoed through the stronghold like a crack of thunder. That night, back in wolf form, back in Elara's shed, he lay with his head in her lap, while she read aloud from the water-damaged romance novel. The hero in the book was confessing his love, and Elara paused and scratched behind Shadow's ear and said something that stopped his heart. "I met the Alpha King today," she said. Her voice was quiet, contemplative. He looked at me. Nobody looks at me. Not like that. She paused. It was strange. He has eyes like yours, the same amber. Is that silly? His wolf made a sound. Not a whimper. Not a purr. Something between the two, an involuntary noise of such raw longing that Elara stopped reading and looked down at him. "What is it, Shadow? What is wrong?" He pressed his face into her stomach. She held him. She smelled like lavender and the cheap clinic soap and the blue dress she had not taken off yet, because she wanted, he realized, to keep wearing it, to keep being the person someone had looked at. "I think," she said softly, speaking to the wolf, speaking to the dark room, speaking to no one. "I think I am tired of being invisible." She ran her fingers through the thick fur at his neck. "I think I want someone to stay. Not like you stay, not because you wander in and I feed you. I want someone who chooses me on purpose, in daylight, with their name and their face and their real self." She was crying. He could feel it, the slight tremor in her fingers, the dampness on his fur. She was asking for exactly the thing he was refusing to give her, the lavender on her skin mixed with salt. Her fingers tightened in his fur. And the Alpha King, liar, coward, king, felt his own eyes burn with a heat that wolves do not produce and could not explain. He would tell her. He would shift and stand before her and tell her everything. Tomorrow. He would do it tomorrow. He did not do it tomorrow, nor the day after, because telling her meant losing this, the version of himself she loved without knowing it was him, the shadow who was allowed to rest his head in her lap without the weight of a crown pressing down on both of them. And because he was afraid, with a fear no battle had ever taught him, that she would look at the king and miss the wolf. But the decision was taken from him on a cold night 11 days after the dinner, when Lyndon showed up at Elara's shed past midnight, drunk and persistent. Elara heard the knock. She opened the door. Lyndon stood swaying in the frame, his eyes glassy, his grin gone crooked. "Invite me in, Elara. Uncle Torben says you should be nicer to me." She stepped back. "Lyndon, you should go home. You have been drinking." Lyndon pushed past her into the shed. His boot caught the edge of the braided rug. He steadied himself on the wall. "Come on. Do not be difficult. I am being nice. Uncle says you need a mate. I am volunteering." Elara was reaching for the door to push it wider, to create an exit, when Lyndon grabbed her wrist. "I said, do not be difficult." The sound that came from beneath the bed was not a growl. It was not a snarl. It was a vibration so deep and so vast that it shook the walls. Tin buckets rattled. The window pane cracked. Lyndon's drunk smile vanished like a candle blown out, and he turned toward the source of the sound just in time to see 240 pounds of black wolf explode from beneath the cot frame with amber eyes blazing. Kael hit Lyndon at the sternum. The impact took them both through the door, shattering the frame, sending splinters across the threshold. In the mud outside, the wolf pinned the nephew flat, jaws 2 inches from his throat, and Lyndon, suddenly very sober, looked up into those amber eyes and recognized them. "Alpha," he breathed. His face went white. Oh gods. Alpha Ashenmore. Kael's jaws parted. His teeth gleamed in the moonlight, and the growl that came from his chest was the sound of a man who had found the limit of his restraint. Behind him, in the shattered doorway, Elara stood with her hand over her mouth. "Shadow," she said. The wolf's ear flicked. He turned his head. She was looking at him, and in the cold blue moonlight, something in her expression shifted. She looked at the massive black wolf, pinning a full-grown man to the earth. She looked at the amber eyes. She looked at the scars along his ribs. Healed. Perfectly healed. Healed for days. She looked at the lavender sprig, still tucked behind his left ear. "Shadow," she said again. But her voice was different now. It was the voice of someone solving a puzzle they had been staring at for weeks. Kael released Linden. The nephew scrambled backward and ran. Kael did not watch him go. He was watching Elara. She was standing in the ruined doorway of her shed, arms wrapped around herself, and she was looking at him the way someone looks at a word they have just learned how to read. He shifted. The transformation was violent in the way all shifts are, bones cracking and reforming, fur receding, the architecture of the body rewritten in seconds. Where the wolf had been, a man knelt in the mud, tall, broad, naked from the waist up, because the shift destroyed clothing, and scarred across the ribs in a line she had traced 100 times with her fingers. Kael looked up at her. She did not speak. The silence between them was enormous. "You," she said. Her voice broke on the single syllable. He stood, mud on his knees, rain beginning. Her face in the lantern light, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open, and he could see her assembling it, every moment, every night. The bath, the bed, the belly scrubs, the leash. She had walked the Alpha King on a braided rope leash through a field of wildflowers. "The lullaby," he said. His voice was rough, raw. It sounded nothing like a king. His voice cracked like a man confessing to a crime. "You hum it when you think no one is listening. It has no words. It goes like this." He hummed 3 notes. Her 3 notes. She flinched. "The rabbit," he said. "The one I brought you. Tuesday. You made stew. You gave me the bowl on the floor, and I ate it, and you called me handsome boy. The bath. You washed me with dog soap and a dish brush, and I climbed into the tub because you pointed at it and said, 'In.' The sweater. Your grey sweater. I stole it last Thursday when you were at the clinic, because it smelled like you and I kept it under my pillow at the stronghold, and Dorian found it, and I told him it was a tactical acquisition." "Stop," she said. He did not stop. His voice was unraveling. The romance novel. The water damaged one. Page 73. The hero tells the heroine he would burn his kingdom for her. You read it out loud, and your voice caught, and you looked at me and said, "Would not that be something, Shadow?" And I thought, yes, it would be. And I meant it about you. "You lied to me," she said. The tears were coming now. Not the quiet kind from before, but the hot, angry kind. "You lay in my bed. I bathed you. I told you things I have never told anyone. I told you I wanted someone to choose me with their real self, and you were right there, and you said nothing." He took a step forward. She took a step back. "I named you," she whispered. "I named you Shadow, and you already had a name. You are a king. You have a castle, and a council, and a crown, and I washed your hind quarters with a dish brush." The rain was falling harder. It ran down his bare chest and pooled in the mud between them. He wanted to reach for her. He did not. "I stayed," he said. "Every night. Every night I came back. Not because you fed me or sheltered me. Because you hummed that lullaby, and you did not know anyone was listening, and I wanted to be the one who heard it. I have 47 rooms in my stronghold, and a bed that could hold 6 people, and I slept on a cot the width of my shoulders, because you put your arm around my neck and your face in my fur. And for the first time in my life, I did not want to be anywhere else. She was shaking. From cold, from anger, from something else. You should have told me, she said. I know. The first day, the first hour. I know. Why? Because you looked at the wolf, and you were not afraid. You were not calculating how to use me, or how to survive me, or how to gain from me. He stopped, breathed. You just washed my wounds and hummed your song and fell asleep with your hand on my side like I was something worth keeping. And I have never. He swallowed. I have never been something someone kept. The rain fell. The lantern guttered. She stood in the broken doorway, and he stood in the mud, and neither of them moved. I need time, she said. He nodded. She went inside. She closed what remained of the door. He heard her slide down the other side of it and sit on the floor, and he stood in the rain and listened to her cry. And he did not leave. He did not leave. He was still there at dawn, sitting in the mud with his back against the wall of her shed, when she opened the door. She looked down at him. His hair was plastered to his face. His lips were blue. He had been sitting in freezing rain for 6 hours because she had not told him to go. You are an idiot, she said. Yes, you are the Alpha King. Also yes, you let me walk you on a rope leash. He closed his eyes. In front of 2 of my own scouts. She sat down beside him in the mud. Their shoulders touched. She did not look at him. She looked at the field where she had walked him, the wild flowers beaten flat by rain. The sweater, she said. The grey one. You still have it? Under my pillow, at the stronghold. At the stronghold, she exhaled. It was not a laugh, and it was not a sob. It was something in between. If you ever lie to me again, she said, I will put you back on the leash and walk you through the center of your own capital. He should not have smiled. It was not the moment for smiling. But his mouth did it without permission, the way his tail had wagged without permission. And she saw it, and something shifted in her face. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He turned his face into her hair and breathed in lavender and rain. Dorian arrived 3 hours later with a dry shirt and a tactical assessment of the Linden situation. He found his king sitting in the mud beside a lambing shed with an Omega asleep against his chest, and the Alpha King looked up at him with an expression that Dorian had never seen on that face before. It was peace. My king, Dorian began. Not now. Linden has fled to Torben and is claiming you attacked him unprovoked. Kael's expression did not change. He looked down at Alara, still sleeping, her hand curled in his shirt. He looked back at Dorian. Summon the Grey Moss pack, he said. All of them. To the stronghold. Tomorrow. The summons went out at noon. By sunset, every wolf within 50 miles had heard the call, carried through the telepathic web that connected pack to pack like a neural network. The Alpha King was making a declaration. Attendance was not optional. Torben arrived with his retinue at dawn, his jaw tight, Linden hovering behind him with a bruised sternum and a terrified expression. They expected a trial, perhaps a territorial dispute, perhaps a war. They did not expect what they saw. The stronghold doors were open. The great hall was lit with 1,000 candles. The Alpha King stood at the center in full regalia, silver crown, black leather, the ceremonial scars on his forearms bared. And beside him, wearing neither armor nor finery, but her own grey sweater, stood Alara. She was shaking. He could feel it through the hand he held. "You do not have to," he had told her that morning. She had squared her shoulders. "I have been invisible for 2 years. If you are going to make me visible, make it count." The hall was packed. Wolves from 3 territories stood shoulder to shoulder, ranked and unranked, Alpha and Omega, and every eye was on the king. Kyle spoke. 11 days ago, he said, his voice carrying to every corner. I entered Greymoss territory injured and in wolf form. I was found by this woman. She cleaned my wounds. She fed me. She sheltered me. She did not know who I was. She did not know what I was. She treated me as she treats every wounded creature that comes to her, with kindness that costs her everything and earns her nothing. The hall was silent. She named me Shadow, he said, and for 11 days I let her believe it. I let her believe I was a stray because I was afraid. Because the Alpha King is feared and obeyed, and never, not once in his life, has anyone tucked lavender behind his ear and called him handsome boy. A ripple went through the crowd. Several wolves made sounds that were not quite laughter and not quite disbelief. Torben stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. Kyle looked at him, and then Kyle looked at Linden, who was trying to become invisible behind his uncle's shoulder. Your nephew, Kyle said, entered this woman's home past midnight, uninvited and intoxicated. He grabbed her wrist when she asked him to leave. The hall went cold. Torben's face changed. For one moment, just one, the calculation left his eyes, and something else replaced it. He turned to look at Linden. The look on his face was not political. It was the look of a man who had put a weapon in a boy's hands and just realized the boy had used it on the wrong target. Torben's hand moved toward Linden's shoulder, not to comfort but to squeeze, hard, and Linden flinched. Nephew, Torben said quietly. Is this true? Linden said nothing. Is this true? I was drunk, Linden whispered. I did not mean. Torben's hand dropped. He stepped back from Linden, a physical distancing that every wolf in the room understood, and for one moment, beneath the political mask, Torben looked old, tired, like a man who had been building something for years and just watched it crack. The boy will be disciplined, Torben said, under our pack's law. Personally, Kyle held Torben's gaze. The 2 alphas measured each other. Accepted, Kyle said. Then he turned to the crowd. This woman, he said, and his voice dropped, shedding its formal cadence, becoming the raw, rough thing it had been in the rain. She is my mate, my fated mate. The bond has spoken, and I have answered, and anyone who touches her, threatens her, overlooks her, or makes her feel small in any way that makes her fold her arms and take up less space will answer to me personally, and the answer will not be a conversation. Elara looked up at him. Her eyes were wet. Her hand in his had stopped shaking. She is mine, Kyle said, and then quieter, so only she could hear. And I am hers. The hall erupted, not into chaos, but into sound, a wall of howls rising from every throat, the primal acknowledgement of a bond declared, and the force of it shook the candle flames and rattled the windows. And Elara felt it in her chest like a second heartbeat. She squeezed his hand. He looked down at her with amber eyes, wolf eyes, the same eyes that had watched her from the rug, from the bed, from the bath. And she saw the wolf in the man, and the man in the wolf, and they were the same. They had always been the same. 3 months later, on a cool autumn evening in the Alpha King's stronghold, in a bedroom with 47 windows overlooking the Northern Dominion, Elara sat on a bed that could hold 6 people and was reading from a water-damaged romance novel she refused to replace. Her voice was soft. Page 73. On the floor beside the bed, a massive black wolf lay with his head on his paws, his amber eyes half closed, listening. The door opened. Dorian leaned in. "My king, the border reports." The wolf opened one eye. "He is resting," Elara said, not looking up from the book. "His wounds are acting up again." The wolf had no wounds. The wolf had not had wounds for 3 months. The wolf's tail thumped once against the stone floor. Dorian looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at Dorian. An entire negotiation occurred in silence. "Of course," Dorian said. "I will return in the morning." He paused. "Shall I bring the lavender salve?" "Please," Elara said. "And the calendula." "He likes the calendula." Dorian closed the door. Elara turned a page. She reached down absently and scratched behind the wolf's ear. His back leg twitched. She smiled. "Handsome boy," she said, "and the Alpha King of the Northern Dominion, conqueror of 3 territories, feared by every wolf on the continent," pressed his nose into the palm of her hand, and breathed in lavender and wool and home. She began to hum.